Hi, everyone. This is Vinay Raman, and we're here with another episode of Manage to Retain, a discussion about how we can, as leaders, start to transform the way we think about things so that we can manage and retain our people, our customers, in just a better way. And I have with me my fearless friends and knowledgeable friends in space of leadership, Sherri, Lou. How are you all doing today?
Doing great. Hi, Steve and I. Yeah.
We've done a fair number of these, and I feel like we've seen so many different dimensions about how we can use data to start to shift how we think as leaders. I'd be kind of curious, what are some of the things that you all have seen as we've been kind of going through this? What have you kind of noticed as we've been through some of these episodes together?
Well, there's so many different ways to look at data. And then we might actually be hitting on this a little bit today, but it's sometimes not always what it appears to be.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to say it. Data is not the reality; it's just a doorway into our reality.
Right. And that's the beauty about, having the metrics and having data, but then there's more to it. There's another story. There's more to it. I think from what we've seen from everything, people fall into this trap from what we've seen that they have these metrics and data, but then that's it, right? And then there's more to it. And then that's the whole point of this series, really, to understand going, wait a minute, there's something beyond these metrics and this data.
It gives you that gateway, right? Data gives you the gateway. It gives you that moment of that starting point to, as you say, begin asking questions, but not just any questions. And I'm sure you're going to hit on that too, but asking the right questions or better questions.
Yeah, that's right. So maybe to start out with that, I mean, if you're joining us for the first time or have seen us before, I'd love to introduce you to Sherri and Lou. Sherri, you want to tell us a little bit about who you all are and what you all do? I think it'll be good for everyone to know that.
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much. Yes, so we are the Lou-Everett Group. I'm Sherri. This is Lou. We are a husband and wife duo, and we are business and executive leadership coaches and corporate trainers. So what we do, we specifically help small businesses and owners and professionals to achieve over 500% growth in their business and professional lives through our proprietary coaching system. We love talking about leadership. We love kind of really diving deep in creating these legacies for businesses and beyond, which is a beautiful thing. And we love helping and transforming leaders day in and day out. So we love to do.
And I'm Vinay, and I run a company named Carmo. And what we do is we use data and analytics. I call it empathize the data and the analytics. We help people shift their understanding of what's actually happening, what they believe is happening, to what is actually happening through the data, so you can start asking better questions. And tied in with Sherri and Lou, we have the opportunity to start asking better questions, so we can shift out of what our perception is a reality to making our perception actually reality. Because there's a difference between the two. Let's kind of start first here, because we kind of touched on this little thing of sort of asking the right questions. From your point of view, I mean, you talk to leaders all the time. It's easy to get stuck in this rut of just saying, I know what's happening, but the world changes. COVID happened, markets change, customers change, people in your company change, right? Things happen to people in your company, right? Life events, family events. So constantly being vigilant of, are you asking the right question, is supremely important. Is that a fair statement in your understanding?
Sure it is, because the right question is whatever question you ask is going to present the result, which is an answer. Well, that answer is what's going to determine our next move as a leader. It's going to determine what direction we go. And it's just like if you're needing directions. Well, I know that us men don't necessarily like asking for directions, but the reality of it is, and with GPS we try to figure it out. But there was a time in a day when, if we were to get misplaced, we could pull over to a gas station and ask somebody directions. But if we pulled in and said, "Is this Alberta?" and they say, "No, it's not Alberta." Okay, thank you, and we get off. We haven't asked the right question because we're still lost. Now we know we're not, but that doesn't tell us how to get to where we want to be. So just because you ask a question doesn't mean it's the right question or a better question. So it's absolutely imperative that we ask the right ones.
So I love the map analogy here, right? If I'm driving down to Disney World with my kids and I don't know that I'm going to Disney World with my kids, it's really difficult to ask a person at the roadside stop, hey, so I'm trying to figure out how to get to 95 so I can head south to get down to Florida with my kids. If I just say, hey, how do I get to the next exit? They're going to say, oh, just go down here and take a left. And I might be going west as opposed to going south.
That's right. That's right.
So if you're not asking the right question in the context of where you're going, I mean, as a leader, I think we know intrinsically we know where we're going, but helping others also align with where they're going, with where we're all collectively going, getting that alignment, I mean, it makes all the difference in the world, right?
Sure does. Yeah, it's navigating the right navigation, right? And as leaders, we want to navigate, but sometimes we're too quick to the punch.
So what I wanted to do today is I wanted to kind of give you some examples of live data from employees, and I've got 5 employees. I've abstracted the names out. They just got employee numbers next to them. And I'd like to show some of these graphs, these empathy graphs, as I call them, to show you what's actually happening with the people. I'll give a quick orientation. But I want to show that there's lots of different questions that can come out of looking at the same exact employee. It's not always conclusive. So the data doesn't actually give you the answer. It just says, here's a doorway that you can step through, the gateway that you said. The gateway to asking the right question. Is that a good place for us to go?
Exactly. It's like a corn maze, right? If they don't tell you which way is the starting point, you're not going to know which direction to go.
Yeah, I think that's a great analogy as well. I'm going to switch screens here and let's start sharing. So let's make this full screen, and hopefully everyone can kind of see where we are. Good. So I've got, let me orient you real quick. So we've got this drop down here in our system. This is our Guru Performance Intelligence System. And what it does is it takes data from an existing organization and it lays it out. What we've done here is we've taken employee 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 employees altogether. Over a date range, we have brought in a number of KPIs that are metrics for those employees. So we've taken a subset of those metrics and brought them all together. So what we talk about this in the terms of effectiveness. I don't actually know from the outside what is good and bad. You as the leader of the company know what's good and bad. So we talk about effectiveness because do metrics align with where you're trying to go? They're just simply markers and telling you, are we performing against a task? So let me show you what you see on this graph here. This is for a technician in a role. And this is the types of things that we're measuring across multiple different systems: compliance, customer satisfaction, fluids, fuel. These are all the things that might be related to the vehicle, mileage per week, on-time arrival, route revenue. Are they making a lot of revenue in the routes that they're running? So on and so forth. So there's a number of different scores here that come from a number of different systems already within the organization. This blue area is how employee 1349 is actually showing up in that role and how effective they are in that role. The best case scenario is that this thing is completely blue. It's just a blue circle. Based on that, you can start to see that there are some areas for improvement for employee 1349. And this green line is what I'll call the B or better, right? That's the 80 on the test. So 80, that's a B or an A in the test. This dotted black line here is how the average person performed on all these various different tests. And this red dotted line is how they is what I would call a low effectiveness or a low performer, how they did. So it kind of gives you a sense of how that this employee does relative to everyone else on all these different tests. And these right here are all the scores for each one of those various things. And it looks like the scores got cropped over here. But you can see some areas that they've done really well. So on a scale of 1 to 100, on this compliance score, they got a 28. On this customer satisfaction score, they got a 72. Sherri and Lou, did I do a reasonable job of walking through that? And does that kind of give a full picture of what we're looking at here?
Yeah, that's good. And for those that just joining us, to kind of give some a little clarity is that what Vinay does here, what his company does, is work with with fleets like delivery and any kind of that type of data, as you can see here, because this is what you're going to need to be able to pull off information to determine where it is that we might be losing not just necessarily money, but maybe time and other resources. And but yeah, I think that and this is a very good employee to look at because of the overall score being low, but also because some of the areas here being actually high, and giving us some variance of what we can begin to look at to determine where to begin and where to start, what questions to begin asking.
I mean, for me, as a leader, I mean, it's very easy for me to jump to a conclusion here that this person might be a waste of time. Right?
Mm-hmm.
There's so many areas that they just need work on. I as a leader probably am sensing or having a sense of frustration because this person is just not, as far as I'm concerned, maybe not able to step up to the plate and do what they need. But there might be an underlying story here, which is that might be my fault that is creating the problem. Is that a fair way to look at it? And you all do a lot of teachings for leadership. Is that the way you all approach this?
Yeah. Well, I mean, sure. I mean, one way to do it is to look at it that way and say, we need to get rid of this employee and invest in somebody else. But in looking at this, you're going to really make a lot of customers mad because this employee has a good relationship with a lot of customers. Yeah. Based on this data. So I would tread on that approach very lightly in this case, because we may lose some customers and by letting this employee go.
And this is a prime example of where leaders and managers, when they look at this data, exactly what you're thinking of like, well, that's it, that's done. This is the objective material, and this person is not, the best of what they could be, and I'm losing money out the door. But that's only half the story.
Sure.
And that's why we can't stress enough in these conversations that we're having that, like, time out, look at this for a moment, and this is just the beginning of the story. And there's ways that we can help and get all these other areas better than they were, or a little bit more even. And again, there's so much more to the story, and that's one thing you just have to stop and listen and for the moment to say, oh wait, what else is going on, instead of being quick to judge.
Yeah, we don't want to diminish the value of this data, though, right? I mean, the value of this data is huge, and we always hear you can't, numbers don't lie, which is true. But we got to ask the question. Well, we say they don't lie, but that means it's telling a story. So what is that story that it's not lying about, right? That's what we got to look at to be able to begin to dig deeper.
Yeah, because if we start to, I'm going to speculate and kind of weave a little bit of a story here, just right in terms of what I'm seeing, and I'd love to see if you all see it slightly differently, right? So I'm looking, like you all said, an employee here who does some things well, right? In terms of their fluid score and their customer satisfaction score. So look, if this is an employee who's supposed to be taking care of their own vehicle because they're allowed to take it home, they're probably doing a good job of taking care of the vehicle, right? Their fuel score, it looks like they're doing a good job of either refueling the vehicle or making sure that it's always topped up, or they're not spending too much money on fuel and not using for extraneous purposes. They're using it for the purposes of the company, right? They're doing a good job by their customers. They're doing better than average as far as their safety. Look, there's some key elements here that this employee is doing quite well. And instead of just kind of throwing it all away, there's an opportunity here. It's a little bit of a challenge for the leader, because they've got to say, hey, it's not so black and white. There is beauty within this employee already, and we can pull this out. Now, compliance and tire wear and the safe driving and the mileage per week, those are places, and the route revenue are places that they can do better. But to know how to do that, they may just not understand how to do it as an employee. Is that the way you all see this? That there's kind of a potentially, maybe it might be a little too dramatic to say diamond in the rough, but there's potential here.
I agree. I mean, if you think about this, right, I'm not a mechanic, okay, but I know a little bit about things. And looking at this situation, you got tire wear. Okay, let's just look at the tire wear score. It's low, well below the average. But then at the same time, at the mileage per week is also very low. So those equate to something, which most likely, if you think of it, but yet customers are happy. He's always on time. So Is the story perhaps that he's taking a different route to make the customers happy so he can be on time? Is there something in the way that's causing this to happen in his route all the time? Because he's good in the other things. And those two things equate. The reason the tire is wearing out sooner is because he's traveling more. He's got more miles. I mean, am I right on? I mean, I'm not a mechanic, but that's usually what it equates to tire usage. But he's making the customers happy and he's always on time. So perhaps he's taking a different route.
So I'm hearing that there's probably some frustration on the employee side, right? There's probably some frustration on the leader side by being able to see kind of in an objective, unbiased way, kind of how this employee is showing up. There's an opportunity for that leader to go and say, hey, I got a couple questions for you. What's going on here? Do you feel like you're driving a lot more than everyone else? What's going on with your routes? What part of your job do you enjoy? So I love talking to my customers, but it feels like I'm driving too far. Yeah, I got some evidence to that fact. Maybe we need to rejigger some things so that you can start to shine and be the, show that true potential.
Exactly. Get more into the story. I agree with that. Because if when your customers are happy in any business, and as a leader, you look at it this way, it's like, well, okay, yeah, you're not getting any complaints from the customers. Because he's getting there on time. He's making them happy. He's delivering the goods that needs to be delivered. But it's the other areas that seem to need some work. So like you had said, there's a diamond in the rough here. There's something that I'm sure that we can learn from this employee and also teach them to make their job a little bit more satisfying.
So I want to bring up another employee just so we can kind of show another compare and contrast. So that there's a story, even not knowing any context, we can kind of start to see that there's some frustration on both sides and there's lack of clarity, right? I want to bring up another graph, but there's principles that you take leaders through, and are there any principles that kind of step to the front in terms of something that they can step into that might allow them to unlock this for their own benefit and employees' benefit?
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely, yeah. We have 10 principles that we call the empowerment principles. And for this particular case, and even for in general, I think it's important for leaders to consider this principle we call the reflect principle. And the reflect principle, what we mean by that is that reflection breeds intention. So we need to create intentionality behind what it is that we're doing as leaders here. Because when you can reflect upon the data in this case, or anything else that you do, and how it is that you manage that information, how you lead those that you are serving or that are part of your team, then we can reflect on how we can become better. How do we make better changes? And in this case, ask better questions. Because if you're not being intentional about that, then you're going to always have difficulty being able to serve those or to lead those that are part of your team that you're responsible for. So reflection not only positively impacts you as a leader, but also impacts the transformation that you can have on those that you're leading.
Yeah. So while you're doing that, I loaded up this other employee profile. We're looking at 4329 now, and we see slightly different profile of an employee here, right? And they're kind of knocking it out of the park as far as route revenue and on-time arrival scores are concerned. So they've got some real strength here, and safety score seems to be pretty good for them. Their mileage per week seems to be pretty good. So they're doing good on a number of dimensions here, and really excelling. It would be a shame to say customer satisfaction, their fuel, their tire wear, they're just terrible. I need to get rid of this person. It's so much more nuanced. And Sherri, you're talking about this idea of understanding the story. This tells you a little bit of the deeper story so that you as that leader can reflect on what's actually happening, saying, what is the true story? What's the true narrative? How do I support them? Because this person may just need a little bit more attention and support in the right areas to become the superhero employee. Is that a fair way to say it?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Absolutely. It's I think just boils down to, don't quick to judge, right? We have a tendency to be in whatever position it may be and just see this type of metrics and data and quickly assume the story, when in actuality, it has nothing to do with it. You'll be surprised anyway. So I think the biggest message and takeaway of any listener listening to this is don't be quick to judge. just by looking at this alone. You got to get the rest of the story. There's always two sides to a story, right?
Mhm.
Well, this is it. So
If you were to take it's funny because I'm just doing this by memory from the last employee. But if my memory, the last few minutes, my memory serves me correctly, what all but maybe the safe drive score for this employee, what this employee is really good at, the other employee that we just looked at is not good at, and vice versa, minus the drive score.
Yep.
Which, as a leader, that should tell me, this employee and that employee can learn some things from each other. What can we do to perhaps exchange stories to help solve some of the gaps here?
Yeah, I mean, there's a topic on the tip of every leader or leadership team's tongue, and that is DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Yeah.
I mean, I think what you're basically saying here, bringing kind of to reading between the lines there, is you've got different people in your organization who've got strengths, and they have the ability to bring that best of breed behaviors to the table here. And by seeing these graphs, you can start to find out who are my centers of excellence and how do I bring them to the front of the room to talk about what they do really well, so that last employee can come and show this employee how to do well in customer satisfaction, on the fuel and the fluids. What are the practices that they practice? What are the behaviors that they practice that allows them to excel in those conditions and also learn from this person? So they all start learning from each other. It almost makes it easier for you as the leader because they just learn from each other.
right.
You said it. Don't have
Yeah.
to say much more.
Mhm.
It's that little if you ever get a knife set, brand new knife set, or you get a knife set for your house, for your kitchen, a lot of them will come with the sharpening rod or sharpening stone, right? That comes with it. Now that thing just will sit there, and you don't use it. It's kind of inconspicuous. But what that tool does is sharpen the knives when they become dull. And without that, then when the knives dull, you have to throw them out and replace them. In this case, and with employees, you understand that they each play that role. They each play the sharpener, and they each play the sharping, the sharp knife at times, and then they have to reverse those roles to resharpen one another. Right? There is a quote, I guess I'll say, or a theme in a very sacred book that says one face can sharpen the face of another. And in this case, and in every case when it comes to teams, we need to look at it that way as a leader. Why wouldn't we?
Where iron sharpens iron.
Iron sharpens iron.
There you go.
Mm-hmm. Sometimes what we think is kind of a paperweight, that paperweight may actually be able to be used. So employees can't be thrown out necessarily. That's not the purpose of data. The purpose of data is how can we use this data to help this data?
Yeah.
How can we help? And then of course that equates to people.
Yeah, and I think the nuance to bring out here is if people hadn't seen this before, that black line kind of tells you what's sort of happening as an organization.
Mm-hmm.
That's your average. So in this particular role, this is how your people are behaving. You can kind of start to see that most people in this area of route revenue score, on-time arrival score, mileage per week are struggling a little bit. And this person far exceeds those capabilities. They are, to some degree, your subject matter expert in this organization for that stuff, right? So bringing them to the front of the room to say, hey, can you tell everyone what you do? Can you explain it for them? It's the right person to bring forward. And the other person that, like you said, Lou, from memory, they were doing really well on some of these things over here. They're the right person to bring to the room because the average person could learn from them.
Yep.
And the data here will allow you to do that, allow you to find out who those subject matter experts are. I almost think to myself, the best thing for me as a leader is say, hey, Jack, or employee 4329, can you get up at the next team meeting and talk about this? And I just sit in the back of the room with my fingers behind my head. I get to just sit back and lean back in the chair.
That's right.
As the iron sharpens the iron. So
that's exactly right. And make sure the imperative piece here that you're mentioning is going to work so well. But only if we have already had the story of the employees. We've met with this employee and said, okay, you're doing fantastic in these areas. Now, these areas here where We need to sharpen up a little bit here, as you can easily see, and find out what the story is behind why. But then once they know where they're strong in, say, well, you're strong here. Can you talk to them about this? But at the same time, then I'm going to have another person talk about these areas. Make sure that you really pay attention to that, because they're going to have some amazing things to help you become better. Now they all know where they stand. And then when they go in to listen to this new information or this training or whatever you want to call it, they're aware of where I am. I'm here. I need to get here. This person is going to help me get there. Without this data, that employee is not going to know that, oh, I need to listen to this person talk about customer satisfaction. I think I do great.
Yeah.
Because they haven't been told this yet.
So I want to switch back from our view of the screen to us for a moment here. So we're not looking at just data and graphs the whole time. I think there's one last thing that I want to touch on here, and it's this idea of being, as a leader, this ability to reflect, see what's happening, have the conversations where, you can kind of do this one of these things where you lean back in your chair because they're managing themselves. To me, it seems like this ability to empower your people to become, I like this idea of creating like Build-A-Bear workshop. You have this ability to create your own teddy bear or whatever else you want, the stuffed animal the way you want it. As a leader with this, you have the ability to kind of create, shape, and mold those employees, those resources into what you want, because you teach them what that path is, but they get to lean into it. I mean, what a good place to be, where both parties win.
Right.
And the data doesn't lie. It shows you what's happening. If you start to work with them in an area and it doesn't improve, you can say, hey, look, we want to focus on this. Are you making enough attention of it? Because you're below the average, you're at the low end of the scale. Who can I put you in touch with? Here's 3 people that you can learn from, and give them the tools to do better.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that a recipe for success?
Mm-hmm.
Agreed.
Yeah.
And it's funny you mentioned recipe, because the first thing I think of is that even and I'm a foodie. I love food. I love to cook. And so I use food analogies a lot. And a recipe is a good one in this case, because you can take a recipe and you look up a meal and you take a recipe and you can follow the recipe to the T. And it's like, oh, and it comes out amazing. It comes out delicious, because that's what the recipe was built for. So it's going to work. Now, I might make that same exact meal, follow that exact same recipe for my wife or for somebody else, even for you, Vinay. And you're like, that's really good, but I go a little lighter on the salt. Right? So just because the recipe works or worked before doesn't necessarily it's going to work for that particular employee. But we could certainly then build upon that recipe, like I would have said, okay, well, I'm not going to add as much salt. And you know what? It actually tastes pretty darn good. Vinay is right. I didn't need all that salt. And then we begin to utilize, if I'm working with Vinay and I'm having Vinay over for dinner, I'm going to make this recipe because he loves it, but I'm not going to put as much salt in it. And it's going to be a better, enjoyable experience for everybody. And there's that win-win, right? There's that win-win.
What I think, the biggest challenge for me as a leader before has been knowing what to do and how to get there. Now I think we've got the tools to do that. This is all an age of empowerment where we're trying to figure out our own intention to get there. Now, if we can also talk to our people, our employees, but here's how, what to get to, here's how to get there. Can I get you there?
Yeah.
If they can lean in, you can start to see when they're doing better, if they're not, so you can give them that support. So you don't have to go and look for someone else. You can use from within, turn the existing employees into superheroes. I think that might make a lot of leaders sleep better at night, at least with me.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. We have enough fires to put out, then have to create more.
Yeah.
Just stop creating the fires, right? Find a way to prevent that by just looking at it different.
So, Sherri and Lou, if anybody has an interest in getting these graphs, feel free to reach out, and I'll be more than happy to send a comment in the comments, or send a direct message to me, and I'll send you a PDF of some of these graphs. But if you'd like to get in touch with Sherri and Lou in terms of understanding more about the reflect principle and how you can start to use that as one of 10 principles, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you so that they can find out about the rest of the principles that you all have?
Yeah, thank you. They can definitely reach out to us. We're on LinkedIn, we're on Facebook as well as Instagram, and definitely reach out on our website, Lou-Everett.com. There's even a link to reach out by phone or even on our calendar. We would love to talk with you. Just have a conversation, see where you're at.
Yep. Feel free.
I think we're probably about 7 or 8 episodes in where we've looked at these graphs a number of different ways. I'd encourage you to see what Sherri and Lou, how they have kind of broken some of these things down as we've looked at graphs and the types of conversations and the feelings involved and how to approach some of these conversations. Because when you show the graph to somebody and say, here's what is actually happening, it takes a lot of it can take a lot of the conflict out of the conversation because here's what's happening. What do you see?
Right.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm getting nervous about having to walk them out the door. It doesn't happen that way. So
no, yeah, agreed.
Mm-hmm.
And if you need more information about Karmo and our performance intelligence tool, which creates the platform which creates all these graphs and these visualizations so that you can break it down and see what's happening in your organization, feel free to reach out to us at www.karmo.com. I'm also on LinkedIn. And you'll see this posted on LinkedIn likely next week. And if you look at either Sherri and Lou and follow them or follow me, you'll see these posts coming out in the future as well. Anybody who's listening in, hopefully this is a good use of time and gave you some tips and tricks on how you can approach your leadership and kind of go up to the next level. But so thank you for listening. Sherri and Lou, thank you so much for your time.
You bet.
Thanks, Vinay.
Thanks again. Appreciate it.